Welcome back to Behind the Palms. I'm Ken Anderson, and I'm here with Rose Guerrero. And today we have a very special episode about the Ashley Gang. This is going to be a fun one.
It is. It's a fun story. Notorious Ashley Gang.
It's a mafia, or what is this?
More like a, tale of a 1920s gang shootout, bank robbers, more than mafia, I think.
Okay.
But unless you want to think that the cops had anything to do with it, there might be some mafia underlying.
So who were the Ashley Gang?
The Ashley Gang was a family. It was a family business. They moved to Gomez, Florida, which is actually where Stewart is, around that area. Stewart Martin County is what we would call it today. They had a homestead up there, and they had a very extensive family. They had about 10 to 11 children, maybe more. I might have lost count on a few of them. But they all lived together on an estate, and they ran their family business of moonshining.
So it was always like a booze type of operation.
I think one of them was a night guardsman at one point. They also were fishermen. They knew the water really well. They had other types of careers and jobs, but the primary focal point for that family was moonshining.
Always kind of did some small-time nefarious activities in and around the swamps of Treasure Coast, right?
What they were doing was not illegal until Prohibition came into effect. So really, their careers were built on, creating booze and supplying it to the community. And then it was the United States that kind of shut them down. So they kind of had to fall into other forms of financial gain. The aspect of going into this other career criminal activity might have just been thrust upon them.
So I know that John Ashley, the quote-unquote head of the Ashley Gang, kind of came to notoriety after one very notable crime that he committed. What was the story behind that?
Well, let's start at when people discovered it. So there was a group of trappers that were out in the Everglades, and they came across a body in the swamp, a body washed up in a canal. And it was a Seminole Indian who was a well-known trapper in the area who had been murdered. They had determined that he did not die from natural causes. There was some type of crime that had been committed against him. And after they investigated in Miami, because that's where it all occurred, they determined that the last person that had been with this Seminole Indian was John Ashley. And they went after him. He went into hiding. And he disappeared for a period of time. And he was accused of killing the Seminole. I believe his name was Dodto Tiger. And this was in around 1911. And he was missing for a very long time. They didn't catch him for several years.
Do we know anything about what happened there? Like why John Ashley supposedly murdered Dodto Tiger?
So when they did this investigation and they found Dodto murdered, they found that he was missing the items that he had been last seen with. He had been seen with John Ashley. They were collecting some skins that they were collecting in the Everglades. Supposedly, an eyewitness saw them arguing at some point, and so there's this belief that John Ashley murdered Dodto for his skins that he had collected in order to get monetary gain from that. So there was some type of argument, some type of financial aspect to that argument.
What other kinds of crimes did they commit like early on? What were they kind of known for? You said moonshining wasn't a crime yet, so what other kind of crimes did they commit? Because they were getting in trouble.
Right. They eventually started robbing banks. They held up several banks. They held up several trains. They did a lot of petty crimes sort of things. But they were kind of known for kind of like a Robin Hood behavior in that they were doing all these things to supply finances for their family. They were a very large family. They were all married. They all lived on the same estate. And they did need a form of financial, stability. And this was what they decided.
It was always this cat and mouse game where they would commit these kind of small-time crimes and then run away from the authorities.
They had a lot of family in the area, so they had ways to evade authority, evade the police, and hide out in the Everglades. He became known as the King of the Everglades.
Yeah, I imagine that the police were like, all right, I'm not going to go in there with all those alligators. You guys win this round, but we'll get you next time.
Yeah, they were able to do that for sure.
Speaking of that, like kind of cat and mouse game, there was Sheriff Bob Baker. He was kind of the nemesis to John Ashley.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So tell me about their kind of relationship.
That relationship really stemmed from John evading the police and how that happened. So John finally gets caught by the police for the DeSoto murder. He gets placed in a jail in Miami. At that time, they placed a police officer in front of the jail to guard him. Well, John's family were thinking that he was wrongfully accused and wrongfully detained. So they came down to rescue John from being in jail.
And that's by posting bail bond?
No, they did not do that. They decided to break John out of the jail, and it ended up in a gunfight with the jailer that was protecting him from being released. John didn't even get to escape during that. It was a massive shootout that John didn't even escape from. And so the jailer ends up murdered, and the sheriff now has it out because all these things are occurring. He loses one of his jailers, so that's a very personal thing to him. Yeah. So he kind of has it out for John. Eventually, John does escape, and that from then on out, he has a target on his back from Bob Baker, the sheriff of Palm Beach County.
So was that the shootout where he lost his eye, or was that a later one?
No, so John ends up losing his eye. He holds up a bank and a gun misfires and it shoots him in the eye, and he loses his eye in that instance. And he eventually gets a fake one placed in, or you see him in many of his different mugshots with a patch on he's wearing a patch on his eye.
So how did he escape jail?
His family helped him. So he had a large group of family members and himself. He slipped out so many different times. You would see a newspaper article that John Ashley is on the run again. John Ashley is still being searched for. Have you seen John Ashley? I mean, they were really pushing to find him.
So how did Prohibition impact the Ashley gang and take their crime family to the next level?
Well, John's family had this estate in Gomez. It was a family compound. And because John had this target on his back, the sheriff was always watching that property, waiting for John to show up, because he always came back to his family and his family always helped him. John's family ends up getting hit hard with Prohibition because now they cannot have their distillery. It's illegal now. In a newspaper article, it says they came across a drunk Ashley brother and the father were both drunk on their property from booze that they had distilled in their distillery, and they get arrested.
During this time of Prohibition, they were making a lot of money. And so how did the law enforcement kind of react to that? Were they able to compete with the likes of the Ashley gang because the Ashley gang just had so much money coming in? But like you said, the law enforcement was already kind of financially strapped. They had to divert so many resources to just find John Ashley. So how did they react?
I don't think the sheriff's department was outnumbered. They had the entire state of Florida looking for these people. Anytime an Ashley family member gets arrested, they would go to prison up at the state in Tallahassee. And it was a chain gang prison. The whole state is looking for Ashley family members. We see several escaped state convict posters with their names on them, with anyone that was involved listed on them. So it was a state-based search for them.
What were the crimes that the Ashley gang committed that really upped the ante for this vendetta that Bob Baker had against them?
There's also this mythos that Bob and John knew each other at some point and that they liked the same woman, but there's no evidence There's no records that they say that maybe Bob and John went to the same high school. And they didn't, John didn't even, finish high school in some sense. I think that John liked to be chased, and I think Bob liked to chase John.
So what led to their downfall?
So John goes to Gomez, to his family's estate, to the compound, and lets them know that he's getting out of Florida. He's done with Florida, done with the police, done with hiding out in the Everglades. So he heads north through St. Lucie County. He's trying to make his way out of Florida. Well, Bob gets a tip. Bob Baker hears that John is done with Florida and that he's going to escape. So Bob calls up, sends information up to the St. Lucie County Sheriff, lets him know, we hear that John Ashley and the gang are going to be making a way through your county, and we need to capture them. Let's set up a trap. They're on the major interstate, and the sheriff places a lantern light and chain along the roadway and puts a lamp right there. It's middle of the night, and John Ashley and his gang see this lamp, and they have to stop driving because they have to take this chain down that's blocking their way. When they step out of their vehicle, they are met with the police to arrest them. But do they get arrested? In the newspaper, they say that John Ashley and the gang decided they were going to escape or shoot out, which is very likely because that was what they were known for, to do these shootouts. And John Ashley and his gang pass away during this shootout.
So they were kind of set up. If I remember correctly, who tipped off the police?
It's a family, right? It's a family gang. The family is supposed to be together. They're all towards the same mission. But John dismissed the family. He took their own vehicle and left the rest of the family. The family got mad. The family was upset that John took that vehicle. And supposedly, from a descendant of the Ashley family, there's this belief that one of the sisters, who was pregnant at that time and was close to having her baby, was upset that there was no vehicle to get her to the hospital to have the baby. And so her husband lets Bob Baker know that John Ashley and the gang have left with the only vehicle from Gomez, making their way up north. And that's how Bob Baker finds out that John is trying to leave Florida.
So it was an inside tip.
Potentially.
There's a little bit of a betrayal by his own sister or brother-in-law, potentially, allegedly. Do you think they imagined that they would have all that they were going to get murdered, or do you think that they were just going to get arrested and probably bust out of prison again later on or something like that?
The pattern had always been that John and the gang would get arrested and then they would bust out of jail, and maybe the sheriff up in Stewart had other ideas.
Yeah. I think that that's what's so fun about these older historical tales, where there is a moral dilemma. I think that told from the perspective of John Ashley, you would probably feel for him.
Right.
And so it does make for a very interesting story. And thank you for joining us on Behind the Palms. Until next time.